Good morning, everyone. I am Brandon Brumfield, and you guys are going to be witnessing the first ever episode of the Pinpoint Podcast about transforming business experiences. I'm happy to be joining you today with Chris Marks, who's an expert in security and in the space. He's got tons and tons of years in this space, and so I'll give him the opportunity to introduce himself. Then I'll give you guys a little bit of a framework about how the conversation will go, and then we'll get started. Chris, the floor is yours.
How you doing? So, I am Chris Marks, cybersecurity professional, and as I like to say, I'm a cybersecurity veteran, not necessarily a cybersecurity expert, because I just feel like, man, also, you could do this. I've been doing this for like 14 years straight, cybersecurity on a corporate level. I know people have done a lot longer than me, and they were like, you learn something new every day. And of course, in this transformation era that we lived in, going from regular computers, servers, to VMs, to microprocessing, cloud computing, web app, now AI. So that's just to give you a point of how fast things transform. So like I said, I've been doing this 14 years. And since we're in the last days of Black History,
Yep.
A little known Black History fact about me, I was the first Black Geek Squad agent in Lafayette, Louisiana. I always like to tight pants and white socks and all that. Yeah,
you were part of the makers of that trend.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome, Chris. And thank you for the intro. So we'll get right into the discussion. And again, our focus here is to really just drive thought, drive perspectives, have people ask questions to themselves and to others, and sort of continue the conversation around cybersecurity and the way that we're thinking about it in this era of big data. It used to be at one point, companies and empires were formed based on their access to data and their ability to be able to wall off others as access to data. And so now the sheer definition around big data is that it's kind of like commoditized, and it's a lot of it, and it's available, and data comes in all forms and sizes, and there's all sorts of ways to package this stuff up. So the question becomes like, how do we secure this stuff? How are people thinking about security? How are people thinking about threats against not just infrastructure, but also data and data sources themselves? So, we'll have a conversation. I'll throw out a few thoughts and then have you respond to them. We'll have some conversation around it, and then we'll close it out.
There's no problem.
We know if we think about big data and the space of data, what organizations are thinking through, right? There's this concept of like data exfiltration. So the data that we're creating, making sure it's not walking out of the door or seeping out of the door somehow. And then there's like this data infiltration, if you will, or infiltration, if you will, where it's like, okay, I don't want this side of the business to have access to that side of the business's data, right? I don't want HR data necessarily flowing around to the wrong people on the other side of the business, et cetera. So like there's this concept of how do we wall off not only data, exiting the company, but also governing how it is inside of how we're managing it inside of the company or inside of organizations. But in doing this, when you think about data exfiltration, thinking about infiltration, and thinking about that's a word I call.
Oh no, that's a master's degree word right there.
So you think about that, and it's like, okay, so really, when you think about a strategy around this, at its surface level, it almost feels like disruptive, violent to like business processes, right? If you will. So there's these business processes that aren't really got their hands wrapped around it, and to really get your hands wrapped around it, it almost feels violent and disruptive to the business. What I'd like to be able to kind of talk with you about is, one, how should an organization think about the balance of this disruptive nature of getting our hands around governance and security of data and big data, large language models, agents, whatever you want to, whatever you can package it however you want, and sort of maintaining this continuity of operational stability. Kind of give me your thoughts.
No matter what realm we're talking about, it always comes back to one simple concept: convenience versus security. And the more convenience you'll have, the less security you'll have. And also, the more secure things are, the less convenient it is. If you don't believe me, passwords, MFA, facial recognition, the more secure. If I add it on, if I have to type in a password, if I get a one-time temporary use code to put in and facial recognition, yes, I'm more secure logging in, but I'm less convenient to log in. Yeah. So that's basic at its core. And so you actually have to go about, as you talk about data has always been gold, but now is the digital gold. People that know everything can do, and when it comes to large language models, AI training, you need the right data. So let's break this down, because it's security in depth. I just said multi-factor. First of all, you need to know what your critical assets and your critical data is. Yep. That's number one. Asset management is always going to be what you need to know. What are my most critical systems? If they go down, we can't do business. And that's from small businesses to corporations. All right, that's number one. Let's mark that down. Who needs access to it? And you could do role-based. Personally, I would do role-based access. So if it's not part of your job, you don't need access. And then there's level of access to it. You don't need to be global admin. Sometimes you may just need to be read only. Sometimes you need edit to do certain your jobs with the big data. Is integrity. Is it the right data? Is it true data? Because now you can falsify. I've never seen or I don't know a more period of time where falsifying data was so easily done. So you have to make sure that whatever you're using the proper data. So you need to go through integrity checks. After that, segregating off, like you said, as a cybersecurity professional, I don't need to know what finance is doing. The finance department, I don't need to know what market is doing. Marketing doesn't need to know what I'm doing. So, that's why that role-based access is implemented. And then you also put on what sections. So to put that, you have to go through a well thought out plan. And you're going to understand something. The more critical your data is, the more security you're going to have around it, and the less convenient it is to access it. And that's the thing, like exfiltration, you want it to be where it's hard to get to. Sure. So you can't extract it. And then you need to have preventative measures. You need to have monitoring done. You need to know who's accessing and where. And then, like, even if we're talking about access, I just said password and authentication, so it's me. You can go authenticate a device too. Hey, only this laptop. So if it's only Chris and it's only Chris's laptop that accessing this data, and something goes wrong, then hey, chances are it was me. A technology I think I would love corporations to start using is blockchain, which blockchain is mostly talked about in crypto and stuff like that, but blockchain is just a digital ledger. It lets you know that at its core, that's what it is. And distributed ledgers and blockchain distributed ledgers has been done since the 90s. But I would love to see corporations incorporate more private blockchain. Yeah. That way you can actually know the integrity of the data, because the blockchain will protect it, and if anything was changed, then the blockchain will report it. So a really good way to mix technologies together as far as big data goes. And then from there, you just use it now. Small businesses might not have the manpower to do blockchain, but I definitely do think that small businesses, especially in today's days, you'll see them, they'll be on LinkedIn talking about, I need a front-end developer, I need a back-end developer, I need an AI, a prompt engineer, but you never see a cybersecurity professional on that. You need to think about that, because there's a lot of things where you're thinking about you're getting off the ground, but you need to get off the ground securely.
You bring up a good point about bringing strategy of cybersecurity, a cybersecurity strategy.
All the time, everybody knows if you work in IT, Patch Tuesday, what that means. When patches come out for you to test. Yep. But, when we're talking about which vulnerabilities are out there for your industry, your company, that involves threat intelligence. And one way you can use it is in a purple team kind of way. So first, threat intelligence. If I work in healthcare, I'm not worried, but my focus is on vulnerabilities or threats in the healthcare space that are attacking hospitals or attacking clinics. So I'm going to focus on that. I'm not worried about what's happening in let's just say the federal space. It could be out there, it could be a threat, but my 90% of my focus is on the healthcare. That's number one. So we have to get rid of that. We have to look at what's happening in the healthcare space. Then there's open source intelligence gathering that you can go through web pages. Hey, this is what's happening in health, and I'm using healthcare as just an example. What's going here, what's happening in the financial institution. Then you need to figure out, I will say this, as far as institution intelligence sharing, the financial district, the industry, they do share what they're seeing amongst each other. That's not normal the case in other industries. Definitely not in healthcare, not that I've seen. But I feel that people need to start sharing. Last year, 2024, you started seeing a lot of hospitals get affected by ransomware, and how they were getting affected was like the same flavor of ransomware because it comes in different flavors. So you look at that, you see what's happening, and you try to predict, and you try to see how, using other people's incidents and start fortifying your own defense in part of that. So like ransomware, we know it locks up everything, all the information. I want to make sure, first of all, my offsite backups are working. I want to have periodic tests to make sure they're working, they're not corrupt. Yeah. Then I want to make sure that I can cut off, if I need to cut off, since it's offsite, cut off permanent access in case we get infected. And how long does it take to restore? Mm-hmm. I'm also training my employees, compliance training that you have to do, but there's a reason for that. And it's not just checking off a box. You are looking to make sure, hey, because it is ransomware and this flavor of ransomware, if I see an email with an embedded link, if I get a message or something pops up on my computer, I know how to respond. And we talk about pen tests or quote unquote red team exercises. Of course, red team are those penetration testers, those ethical hackers that come in and test your actual defenses to see how good you are. And those are good for compliance. However, somebody made a point, and I actually like the point. If you really want to protect yourself, you have to go with a purple team, not a red team. Red team is just for compliance, but a purple team, you have one red person and one blue working together. We got the red team guy tries to infiltrate. The blue team looks at his tools for incident response and see if he can seize him or not. If he can see him, your tools are working. You know what to look for, and if there's a certain alert that pops up, you ask the red guy, hey, what did you do? Okay, but if you don't see him, you know you have a gap, and you need to figure out how to remediate.
How do we tie together automation, agents, some front-facing tool to be able to access data anywhere we want, right? And quickly generate insights or something deliverable, whatever the case is, right? So thinking about the entirety of the workflow. As a cybersecurity professional, you would probably assume the one thing that you would be hearing there is, my goodness, there's a lot of attack surfaces that will be generated. Securing endpoints and there's a tons of attack surfaces that we're introducing as we try to work with organizations to be more automated and harness the power of OpenAI and things like that, right? So talk a little bit about how in your own career, how you have maybe sort of navigated or transformed the way you once thought about walling off yourself or protecting yourself from one certain types of threats, certain type of vulnerabilities, to now this, I won't call it totally new, but a totally like a transformation type of threat sets. Now you've got attack surfaces in abundance, maybe didn't play itself out 5 years ago.
So let me say first, if you're going to be in cybersecurity or IT, you're going to have to be adaptive. If you're stuck, you become a dinosaur, in a number of years, if you don't transform. So let's take a good transformation that you start off when you said APIs. Web app application security and API security, my personal opinion, two different things. People, and I'll say this from a cybersecurity standpoint, when it came to web app, everybody, web app scanners, putting it in the cloud and whatnot, that's cool. but you forgot about your APIs. APIs became a black hole of cybersecurity. That being, how is that? If you're not, a web app needs APIs.
Yeah.
But if you're not controlling your APIs themselves, then your web app could be totally secure. You could do static and dynamic scanning of it, looking for vulnerabilities, or you might put in, like I said, you could have it in the cloud where you think it's secure, but really it's just your information on somebody else's device, the firewalls and whatnot, but your API is still called. Mm-hmm. So there's been times where I've seen people make APIs. They're programming, they're developing, they're doing the job. They make APIs and then they forget about it because they moved on, or the API didn't work or whatnot. And so it becomes a black hole, and you have you have APIs just sitting there. Maybe not connected to anything, or maybe connected to something else and people forgot. And then the control, like, having it, sometimes they're not all put through a throttle gateway. Mm-hmm. So that's a number of things. So which can that's been transformative, and people have started looking at them. One thing as a cybersecurity person, and I say that, is that business drives security. We're there to support the business. That's what we do. We're not here to tell the business no. We're here to tell the business how to securely do work. So as a surface, reducing the attack surface, you have a web app, you have an API, where is it going to? You have to look at things holistically, because certain times, a web app, you can get a vulnerability off a scanner, and it's like, hey, this is a high. But then you look at what it is, and your remediation factor, like, hey, is it, I got to give an example. Like, you have a web app and says, oh, it's critical, it touches the internet, it's open internet, anybody could come in and exploit or get log in. But your control is, it doesn't see the firewall, or maybe there's a knackle in place in there where it only allows certain people, or even the direction. Maybe it's not two-way traffic. Maybe it only allows one-way traffic. It doesn't allow traffic, inside. It might only allow traffic outside. So you have to look at everything holistically, and everything is evolving. But if you know concepts, if you've been in it, then you know how to handle it, because it's just the same concept in a different arena. Like I said, from web app security, API security, now LLMs for big data. Last year, Microsoft had a great conference. I'm not trying to call out this vendor. I'm not trying to spotlight, but they had a great conference. I forgot which one it was, but they talked about how they tricked AI into giving the keys to the kingdom. Mm-hmm. So, and what to do. Like I said, you have to have access block up. It has to be segregated. You can only have certain people in there. And then you have to train the AI to understand these attacks and how to block it. Like, but I mean, you got to live this stuff every day. So you got to be on your toes. You're always going to learn something new. You have to attend these conferences. And then you have to take that knowledge and make a business case to the higher ups. Because without the buy-in of the business, like, hey, I know you want to do this, you want to have this application come in, you want to do this, but here's the reality of the situation. Here's the vulnerabilities that could happen. And honestly, when your business will not understand your cybersecurity language. You need to convert your cybersecurity speak, or I like to call it your cyber nerd speak, which we all do, into business. How much will this cost? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Because some business-wise, like, if you have an asset that costs $10,000, but the remediation cost is $30,000, and I'm just throwing out numbers, but I mean, in certain cases it is. Is that really worth this? Right. I'm paying money, and this is how business speaks. So when you go to them, you need to have a solid business case of why it needs to happen. Try to look at the ahead of time of forecasting, like, hey, this could be big. So we need to get ahead of this right now, and then state your case. And one thing, people, cybersecurity professionals, we like to say no, but we don't like to be told no. I'll never forget, I had a CISO that stated that it is our mission to state the case for the win. Now, if we don't get the win, then what did we do what could we have done better? But At the end of the day, it's up to the business.
Speaking of kind of staying in the vein of transformation, right? Is having a stout data security strategy, in your opinion, the companies that have really stout, really strong data security strategies, is that a leverageable competitive advantage to others in the space?
Yes, 100%. You can have a tool. I'll never forget. You can have vendors have tools. You automatically put it's a security tool. Now it's $100,000 more. Why? Because businesses want to feel. I'm not calling nobody out, but nobody wants to go into Congress and testify over a breach.
Right.
This is why we have different compliances. This is why yearly compliance checks, because everybody wants to feel secure. And I'm going to let you know right now, any good C-suite, which vice president, whatever C-suite, the stuff that they don't, you ever wonder why they don't sleep? Because they're worried about things that is out of their control. Sure. So you can give them a sense of control if they know not only are we quote unquote protected, but we've done the training, we've done the tabletops. In case if something happens, we get notified. And there's also not if something happens, when something happens, we can, shrink the effects of it and not let it spread. Right. Yes, it's absolutely is buying. People have used, go on LinkedIn right now. Anybody can go on a company's page, right? They're selling services. One of the things that's going to be on there, secure. That's the word they're going to use.
So not only is it necessarily a competitive advantage, right now it's almost a cost to be in the game, right?
It is a cost.
That's the price to be in the game. If you don't have a stout, highly rated security strategy with like high fidelity around it, then you probably should close your doors.
I always make this analogy because I watch football. Mm-hmm. Your cybersecurity team is your offensive line.
Yeah.
Straight up, we don't score no points.
Yeah, you don't do it.
We don't get the glory, but when it comes to the team, and you can win games without a good offensive line, but you ain't gonna win a Super Bowl. No. Clearly, ask Kansas City and the Eagles last year in the Super Bowl. Yeah. Who had the better line? And what quarterback was better protected? And who won that Super Bowl? You're gonna pay for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it will be a cost to you. So if you're a chief information security officer at an organization,
hypothetical, I'm not. You gotta state that it's hypothetical. Yes,
hypothetically. Yeah. But you've spoken to a number of them, right? And so, what are the three things that keep them awake at night? What's the three things that is on the top of all of their minds when they're trying to make sure that they have this comprehensive security strategy, data security strategy in place with high fidelity? What are the three things that keep them up at night thinking about that?
Number one is asset management. Mm-hmm. It's not, and believe it or not, that's where are my assets? Where are they at? Who has access to them? Yep. Number one, because I want to say years ago, there was a company, and it was like, we don't know, what on, because everything was still on premise.
For sure.
We don't know who has access to these servers. Is these servers still up? Mm-hmm. I remember one time, and this was literally 2000. I'm not gonna say when, but let's put it was past 2010. I saw an XP box. I saw a Windows 95 box. I was like, what? That asset management.
Yeah.
Asset management. That's number one. Number two, employee training. I will say that are the employees, because security is everybody's responsibility.
Talk about attack surfaces.
Yeah.
Everyone.
I can try to find a password. Mm-hmm. I can go through that, or I can, look up this employee and try to get them to click on this link, and I'm in. That's why, like what they call whaling, there's phishing attacks, those fake emails, and then there's whaling attacks, which they go after the C-suites. And I'll be honest with you, when it comes to the C-suite security, I think the number one unforeseen safeguard, the unforeseen, unnoticed safeguard is their executive assistant.
Yeah.
Because in my years of doing phishing emails in the side corporations, nobody picks out a phishing email, a fake email, more than that executive assistant. I have had some, come back quick. Hey, this doesn't look right. So again, employees, and I honestly, executive assistants for C-suites are unsung heroes. I'm just telling you right now. And then the third is just really like changing technologies. Just because something is new doesn't mean we need to skip a risk assessment over it. Perfect example, AI. You had ChatGPT, you got Llama with Meta. And I think if I'm not mistaken, Llama was never supposed to come out open source. I think an accident happened or something. I got to relook that. And then now was the one from China, DeepSeek.
DeepSeek.
And he was like, yeah, it's more powerful than the rest of them. But I'm like, do you really want to trust this?
Yeah.
You know where it's coming from. Like, and I mean, we block IP based on region. So why would you just automatically, just because it's fresh? Yeah, that'd be the top three. Like a proper risk review on new.
So a question that I'm gonna ask every time we have a conversation on Pinpoint Podcast, and it's something that I sort of make a practice of doing. What did we not talk about that you would have thought we would have talked about?
People choose to not actually enforce that right. That they say like, oh, people, I've had conversations, people might know about a VPN, so your ISP don't track what you're doing, and people are like, I'm not doing nothing wrong. Your data could be used for malicious intent to attack you. But now your data can be used for monetary gain. Yeah. People are using your data and you're not getting paid off of your data, and that's not right. So people's attitudes towards their privacy, to their data, should be talked about. People need to be a little bit more passionate about keeping their data private. And then what you do, and it's everywhere. I shouldn't be in an age where I'm talking about Nike, Reeboks, or I go visit a website on a computer, then I'll log into social media.
Sure. And
then I get a ad for Nike or whatever I was looking at. Now I'm not gonna say the certain vendor of cars, but they take a lot of pictures while the car is in motion. Like I said, cars and laptops on wheels, and they're building a mapping system that they're gonna want to sell to you, but you're the one that's helping them build the mapping out by driving their car with cameras.
I'm gonna coin that. People's access to people's attitudes towards the privacy of their data needs to be talked about. It's almost like they're collecting data and then selling it back to you. They're collecting it for free.
They're literally collecting it.
And there's no balance of trade there. Yeah. There's no balance of trade there. Yeah, absolutely.